Apparently, there has been 12 or more employees that have been terminated for having premarital relations and having extramarital affairs. Very arrogant. According to Dave Ramsey directly, he says that employees have... What's up, YouTube? Welcome back to the channel. Today, I'm going to give an update on the federal lawsuit that is being filed against Ramsey Solutions, the company founded by Dave Ramsey himself. And I'm going to give updates on statements that he's made, his attorneys have made, and the federal lawsuit that had been filed by Caitlin, former employee who was terminated by Ramsey Solutions because she had become pregnant out of wedlock. For people who don't know what I'm talking about, recently, there was a young woman named Caitlin who was fired from Dave Ramsey's company, Ramsey Solutions. She was fired because she had become pregnant and she was not married. They have a code of conduct which includes abstaining from extramarital relations and abstaining from having extramarital affairs. Being that Caitlin had become pregnant out of wedlock, they had turned that to be reason to terminate her. To separate my own opinion, I had expressed in previous parts of this series in which how I felt my heart was heavy for this woman to be terminated because she had been pregnant and she wasn't with her partner. My own opinion, I had expressed that, I want to be married before I have children. I want that commitment to my family and to, grow together and make that commitment together to grow. I would hope that or wish that for other people. But at the same time, I don't think it's for me to enforce on other people. I think that's something that people have to come to terms with themselves. To how I see it, even as someone who's been brought up in a Christian home, who goes to church, who believes in God, I don't think that's for me to enforce on other people. However, Dave Ramsey has a company in which he wants to enforce those values. It seems that that is clearly written in his code of conduct. It's part of their moral clause when people sign up to be employees, and this is how he wants to run his company. Now, according to a new report that was released, it was stated that the company Ramsey Solutions did not terminate her specifically because she got pregnant, but rather because she had an extramarital relations. And they're standing on that is not because she was pregnant, but rather she was having relations outside of a marriage. The attorneys that represent Ramsey Solutions have stated that there have been at least a dozen other employees, 12 employees. I know in the previous videos I had said 8, but apparently there has been 12 or more employees that have been terminated for having premarital relations and having extramarital affairs. So Caitlin was not the first person to be terminated for those reasons. In their company guidelines, in their policies, they make it very clear that having extramarital affairs or having premarital relations is a fireable offense. However, something that they had pointed out in that article that I had read that's giving updates upon these statements from Ramsey Solutions as well as Dave Ramsey themselves, they gave a really interesting point that they don't really illustrate or declare exactly how it is that they know that their employees are having premarital relations outside of the workplace or having an extramarital affair. In addition to this, they had pointed out that if you go on the Ramsey Solutions site under the Ask Dave section, clearly do state that the company has the legal right to terminate an employee for having premarital relations as well as having extramarital relations or affairs. Now, I'm going to quote this directly off the paper because I want to get this perfectly right. According to Dave Ramsey directly, he says that employees have to follow a moral code. And the website also answers a question very directly, whether an employer is legally permitted to terminate an employee for having an extramarital affair or having premarital relations outside of the office. And Dave's direct statement was yes. Dave says yes, the company does have the legal right, according to what he's saying, to terminate an employee due to extramarital affairs, premarital affairs. And his words exactly are, we have a moral code of conduct at our office. I fire people if they have extramarital affairs. Also pointing out Tennessee, the state in which Ramsey Solutions operates from, is an at-will state, meaning that in general terms that a company reserves a right to terminate an employee for any reason that they want, or nor do they have to have a reason at all. I know a lot of employer like myself who've worked for an employer, and probably you as well, have signed a paper saying that a company can terminate you at will with or without cause, and they don't really need to have a specific reason as to why it is that they're letting you go. I'm going to try to get this in Dave's voice because as I read his quote here, I heard it in his voice, which is kind of funny. But his direct quote was that they freaking work for me. I know I've heard that plenty of times, but he says that they freaking work for me. His exact quote was, "This is an employment at will state," which means that if I decide I don't like people with green eyes, I don't have to hire you and I don't have to keep you anymore. I know reading that, for a lot of people, that could be surprising that he'd say something, that could sound so abrasive like that. Like, if I don't like people with green eyes, then I don't have to hire people with green eyes. I don't really expect anything different. Dave Ramsey has been the same person for the years that I've watched him and listened to him. He has his own opinions. He stands by them. It comes across to me as an extremely stubborn human being. He doesn't like to admit that he's wrong, or that there's another answer that can also be correct that is not his answer. He seems to be much of a person who's like, it's my way or the highway. And to be honest, it's like, from who I used to be, I resonate with that, because I too used to be a very rigid human being and I had rigid beliefs. And if people didn't fall in line with that, then, screw them. But I just can't live my life like that anymore. Emotionally, spiritually, mentally, it just doesn't work for me. I have to understand that people are not myself. They don't think like me. They don't live like me. They don't have the same experiences I do. They don't have the same traumas that I do. So to expect someone else to live their life the way that I expect them to live is, honestly, to me, very arrogant and selfish. That someone has to live the life that I expect them to live, the way that I expect them to live it, at the time that I expect to live, is extremely arrogant. And it took some great people who are in my circle a long time to show that to me clearly, that I cannot expect people to live the way that I want them to, because I want them to. So after getting to see some of what occurred with Chris Hogan, Melissa's direct accounts on how she felt she was treated by the company. Her husband was dismissed, terminated, or he had willfully resigned. We don't really know for sure. And now the statements released by Dave Ramsey Solutions attorneys, as well himself, we get a more objective view of what exactly happened, or we can make a more objective stance. This is how I see it. How I see it is that this young woman who had become pregnant and become terminated, I know myself, I would not bring myself to fire this young woman because she had been pregnant and that she wasn't married to her partner. Though I would hope that she would be married and that she would have that committed, loving family dynamic between her and her partner, and to raise that child together, that's not for me to force on her. However, aside from that, you also have to look at it from the company's standpoint, in which that the company has made it clear that this is something that they don't stand for. Now, they've fired at least 12 employees, at least 8 of which for having premarital affairs, and at least 2 employees who had extramarital affairs, according to the reports. So we can see that the company does have a clear moral code of conduct, and that I would have to reasonably expect, I would have to reasonably assume that this young woman knew that. She knew that this is the company that she works for. This is the culture that she works in, and she wasn't the first person to be terminated for such behavior. And that I think, putting myself in those shoes, I would have to expect that this was going to come. That if the company says that we're going to terminate employees who do these things, then I would have to assume that if I made it clear that I did those things, that they will terminate me too. But the big issue that I have, and I think many people have, is that she was terminated seemingly immediately after she had made it clear that she had premarital affairs by becoming pregnant, requesting the company that to get maternity leave. But when Chris Hogan had extramarital affairs, he was not treated the same. He was not terminated immediately. He was put on a special restoration program in which he was to reconcile things with his wife and continue as a functioning member of the company. I think that this is what people have a strong opinion on, is that if you're going to treat someone a certain way, treat everybody the same way. I strongly believe this myself. My CEO, my supervisor, my subordinate, myself, we're all on the same playing field. If there's a rule that we need to follow, we all need to be following the same rule. We all need to be treated the same if we don't follow that rule. And there has to be the same consequences across the board. Because when you create a situation where people feel as if they're not being respected in the same way that everybody else is being respected, it creates a level of toxicity in the workplace that is very difficult to deal with. For me, it's hurtful to see this woman be fired because she got pregnant and had premarital relations. I would expect her to have seen that that was going to come, because that wasn't the first time that came. But the issue is that Chris, under similar circumstances, was not treated the same way. And that is the central evidence to this federal case that they're bringing against Ramsey Solutions, is that they are not consistent in the way that they are carrying out the moral code of conduct that Dave says himself is what they live by. And though it's sad for me for Chris Hogan to be terminated and for him to go, it makes sense. You know, it makes sense that a man who's having an affair in the workplace with another employee in a Christian-based company that has clearly stated that they're highly against extramarital affairs, it makes sense that Chris Hogan was terminated, even though that's really sad for me to see. But it was the rules, and it makes sense because you're compromising the company, you're compromising that other employee, you're making it difficult for other employees in the workplace who are probably aware or witnessing maybe some of the interaction that's happening between them, and let alone the devastation that has on his now ex-wife. And we often forget how affairs damage children. So you have to see how his children were hurt in this whole situation, and as well as his now ex-wife and himself, you know, the damage that he's doing to himself in general. I feel, as well as I feel for this young woman and her being terminated, especially during such a vulnerable time in her life. I personally still see like Melissa as just a victim in all of this. You know, she didn't ask to be, she didn't ask for that infidelity. She didn't ask for that hurt and betrayal. She didn't ask for her family to be affected this way. My heart is out to her. I pray for her. I hope that she heals and then she grows from this and she can carry on in a reasonable manner. And I hope that Chris as well learns from this mistake. He heals and he grows, because this is something that, is devastating. Taking those actions outside of your marriage is devastating. It is devastating to yourself, it's devastating to your partner, and it's devastating to the children who are, they're bystanders in all of this fallout. I feel for all of them and, what they're going through, and I hope that they all can grow and heal from this. As things continue to unfold, I'm going to make sure to update you guys on any new information and new news. Again, my name is Ludwig. Please subscribe so you can stay up to date with all the new proceedings, and I hope to see you guys soon. Thanks for watching. Peace.